we can build curriculum around any student. Like I can individualize the skydiving training. Like you can individualize the business training.
Because we're trained in education in a traditional old school sense is to sit, be quiet, and watch and listen and take it in, right? Well, guess what you do on your phone?
Conversations convert. That's where you can change minds and change lives. It's not like talking at someone, it's talking with someone.
Yeah.
That dialogue is so important. That's where you're gonna light students up and also just disrupt education in really, really positive ways.
Went all the way over here to theory, and we stayed in here, and we were like, go to the 4 years and everybody will be okay. And we just lost sight of well, I mean, let's be honest. Why do you go get post-secondary education? To get a job, to make money, to fund your life. That's it. I mean, let's be honest.
You're listening to the Disrupt Education podcast, powered by U Science. Here are your hosts, Peter Hostrawser and Alli Dahl.
Welcome back to the Disrupt Education podcast. I'm Peter Hostrawser. I got Alli Dahl here. Excited because now another storm is coming. So I guess it makes my dog nervous. So how you doing, Alli?
I'm doing well. I I just want to take a moment to appreciate like how much we love doing this work and podcasting, and it's conversations like we had last week with Mark Covelle that just re ignites that passion for podcasting. Because it's like we want these stories, we want these voices that are really doing phenomenal work in education. And yes, disrupting education, but like it's so much bigger than that. And when we get to have these conversations, share these conversations, they're not behind closed doors. And like so that you, the listener, can share them with those that need to hear it. I mean, like I heard on last week's episode the need for policymakers to hear this type of podcast, because Mark was talking about how, like oftentimes in politics or just, I mean, anywhere, even from the community level all the way up to local, state, federal lawmaking, they just might not be aware of what is going right and well in education. So how do we invest in it? It just made me think of this funny book, and it's kind of an urban legend myth, but there's this law that donkeys can't sleep in bathtubs. Have you ever heard this?
No, I've never heard that.
It's a
Now I'm
book.
intrigued.
Yeah, it's a book. It's about like crazy laws, and this one it's not really rooted in, as far as I know, like it's an actual law. There's like a myth around that, like a dam broke and a donkey was in a bathtub and it caused all these issues, and so it became a law that like donkeys can't be in bathtubs after 7 p.m. But like Mark talked a lot about like, we need to, instead of stacking dirty plates, we need to think about like, if we add something, what do we take away? But it's also just, like, sometimes I think with education, people would equate it to like a donkey sleeping in a bathtub, like it's irrelevant. And like, what is it doing there? Like, there's so many questions. So how we have these conversations and the need for these conversations is of the utmost importance in this season in education.
Yeah, well, let's start there. I mean, again, you probably heard me say this before, listeners on the podcast, but my father told me never to get into education because of the politics, right? And he's not wrong, but I do like the fact that this really is kind of bipartisan. This doesn't have to do like with what Mark said. It's not red or blue, left, right. It really is just like moving people forward. He brought up a really interesting point that kind of made me think a little bit about, who are our lawmakers and at a local, state and national level. I mean, you can list and probably see what kind of education they have. And I would say 99% of them probably had some sort of traditional education. And that's how they're creating laws that work for them, I guess, right? You're going to see a lot of like Ivies and high, quote unquote, high end or high sought out schools, and different things like that, especially the higher you go up in government. So I would be interested to see, who are the politicians and the lawmakers who really understand CTE and really understand the economic development. And is there a way that we can make them louder? Can we really help people understand? It really is like you have a whole bunch of people. I mean, this is generalizing and I'm sorry, but like a whole bunch of people who really understand how to change a shoe on a horse, but has never changed a tire on a car. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's these different things that just happen. That was a big lightning bolt right there. So if you saw me like look to the side. But anyway, so yeah, I think that's interesting. We have to tell these stories and what did he say? 1949 was some of the laws that they had. Like, I mean, we're nearing 100 years, folks. Like, yeah, we gotta start taking a look at, how are we stacking dirty dishes and are we getting rid of those things? Do we really need a law about a donkey in a bathtub? I don't know.
Just it's a funny book. I think one of my uncles gave it to me like as a probably just a funny little gift, and there's a
Mhm.
whole bunch of them, but it's a cute little book about crazy laws that exist or existed. And wow, Mark really gave us a big picture beyond a donkey in a bathtub of what
I love we're gonna keep
education.
going back to the donkey in the bathtub all the way through this. So
I
we're gonna
told you
have
I
to
had a good
wrap this up with
open.
that. So I'm gonna try to do that.
Um, his passion is so it comes through. Mark is a good friend of ours
Yeah.
that became a friend because of the podcast. And like that's why I'm just feeling, all these warm fuzzies because we get to have these conversations and we want to have these conversations and then we get to have even more of them, Peter, than I think me and you could have ever imagined 4 years ago when we started podcasting together. I mean, like you had this vision 10 years ago, but it's just like it's a cool place to be. And I teased him a little bit about this book, but right, like he has a lot to share. And as a former traditional public educator in the core four as a science teacher, I'm really interested in, the work, his working title. This is not like it could change, but it's designed for purpose. And he really wants to help shape those in pre-service going into education or going into administration, like understanding the CTE lens. Because I mean, I had a dad who was a shop teacher, right? Like, and I still didn't understand the value proposition of CTE.
Mhm.
And it was in my own family. I I took the required quote unquote shop classes in middle school and I took photography as an elective. I took theater like um those aren't CTE, but I'm just like in high school, like I didn't have a background in business,
Mhm.
in any of like the pathways that like are really, really needed. I was like Mark, the traditional route, have almost a terminal degree, right? Like, I mean, I have a master's plus 30, like there,
Mhm.
I've done the school thing. And it wasn't until meeting you and doing this podcast and talking to people, hundreds of interviews later, seeing and having my own light bulb moment, right? Of like the
Mhm.
power of this work and how much this type of work is needed and is designed for purpose, like that working title of the book. It could just impact so many communities because I think it's easy to forget because me and you have these conversations all the time. And like those who, if our avid listeners, like you're used to hearing us weekly talk about, CTE as a prominent way to disrupt education. It's not the only way, it's a way. And there's so
Mhm.
many things built into that. But it's easy to forget that people still need to understand what it is
Yeah.
and the power it can have. Like it's
Hmm.
not being leveraged. Like for those of us in this work, and we see how like the demand and the relevance just skyrocket, there are still communities that don't have these conversations. There's still teachers that are completely oblivious to what's happening in the business classrooms and the impact that it can have. And it's to no fault of their own. They're just in the system. And so that's why I really encourage our listeners, like, please share this. Like if you know someone like who serves on like a school board, or someone who is running for office, or you have a teacher that like needs to hear this, please share these conversations out. Pick your favorite episode, share it, because that's how we really do make these changes on a bigger scale.
Hmm.
Is you got to tell the story. Mark talks about that in
Yeah.
the episode.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And, we did have a side conversation, talking about, theory, and then in practice, teaching and, who's exposed to that, et cetera, et cetera. And it is interesting. And I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. It's a difficult conversation. I believe that, obviously with a college for all boom that went through and everybody, I mean, at the end of the day, we were teaching the systems, again, were designed to do exactly what they're supposed to do, but like we were teaching to high stakes testing, where we're teaching to what comes next in the step, just the next step. We weren't thinking holistically. And I think one of the challenges that I've had to overcome coming in from, not a traditional straight from, high school to college to become a teacher right back in is, and I'm gonna don't everybody get mad at me yet because I'm not down talking that. There are good parts of that I've learned, but that I've also seen, outside, and we've seen outside of the educational four walls, the academic part and the professional part. And a lot of it is like it just really starts making you like, what are we doing? And then you get, I'll be the first to admit that I got frustrated because I just didn't understand until
Mm.
you start to listen to educators who are on very far on the academic side. How did they look at this and why they don't understand CTE? And I think there's a spot here where we can really start to look at that education part that Mark was talking about. Nowhere into all of his, degrees there was CTE intertwined. There was no like professional world. There was no nothing. It was all just kind of theory. And I can go back. I mean, I have a master's plus 40 some too. And it's like, they're really what outside of some of my business courses in college, like for undergrad, I mean, there was some practical teaching in my business education certification. But outside of that, yeah, there was no real like, hey, you should probably go, grab, the local, I don't know, entrepreneur and have them come in and work with your students, or you should build internships and stuff. Now that's becoming more and more relevant now because of some of the policies that we have here in Illinois. However, it does give me the idea of when I work with quote unquote traditional educators, and I don't say that as a bad thing. Look, I never knew like about mapping and understanding what objectives were. It was just like because in the world, like you're thrown to the wolves and they're like go figure it out. Why do you need me, especially with all this AI and everything like that, which makes it easier. But I also understand the importance for foundation, and I think there's this balance. We went all the way over here to theory and we stayed in here and we were like go to the 4 years and everybody will be okay, and we just lost sight of exact. Well, I mean, let's be honest, why do you go get post-secondary education? To get a job, to make money, to fund your life. That's it. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, yes, thinking to think and to hypothesize is actually a profession, right? Like like I know a lot of people who work in that area, and it's more understanding and trying to do design thinking in different ways. But it's so I think that's something that really sparked my imagination out of last week's podcast with Mark, because he was really talking about, here's the classical kind of education. Well, why not? Why are we not seeing this? And the demand is there. I think the challenge really is, number one, how do we put that into teacher training? Because a lot of people will talk about teacher training. I'm sure we'll do a podcast straight on teacher training. But also, what do you do with these amazing traditional educators who don't know anything? I should say don't know anything, that misunderstand or has never worked with CTE in the way that we do things on that side of things. I mean, I've had several conversations with your traditional educators, and they really have never understood how to reach out to community, how to bring in a politician into a history class, or bring in a welder into a calculus class, right? They've never done that, and I think there's opportunity there. So these are the things that to your point, this is why I love these conversations with people like Mark who are thinking about this and or doing it. I want everybody to, the challenge is, what do you see? Like what is one step that you can start to understand about, not just theory, but practice and real practice in your community?
I mean, I love that he said CT needs to be in traditional K through 12 spaces to be bold.
Hmm.
And so that perspective is a game changer for education. Is like, I just think, how do you have disruption? You have to have, yeah, it starts with conversation, right? Like, what do they say? Like, con conversation changes minds. Like, it's not like someone's not going to post something. You might read it, but and I don't think it's going to change your mind. Now, if you read it and then had a good, healthy discussion about something in real time with someone, you might have your mind changed. Like, I can speak to that from the 200 episodes that I've been on now with the podcast. My perspective and mindset around education has totally shifted. Like, if I go back and listen to the questions and the thoughts that I had about education 4 years ago, they're different now. But why? Because I'm having a healthy dialogue with a lot of different perspectives about it. And so I think it's possible that many traditional spaces have had their walls and like too high, their doors closed too tightly, and the mark has been missed.
Hmm.
Not Mark Covelle, but like the mark. And and so, right, like this idea of theory versus practice in my own educating, I missed the mark. You don't know what you don't know, but once you unwrap and like you are no longer ignorant to the fact that like what you're teaching doesn't really hold water, uh you can't go back. I mean, you can, but then you're doing it, I feel like, unethically or morally. I'm not like, I'm just saying, like, I would have a hard time going back into a classroom and not painting a broader picture other than the four walls that those students are in. I would
Hmm.
be doing them a complete disservice, and I would have a moral conflict doing that.
Yeah.
Even when I'm subbing, my whole goal when I'm there is to try and connect one student, get to know, like ask them enough questions to get them to think beyond the four walls. Like if I can
Yeah.
make a difference in one kid's life on that day, and oftentimes they want to know more about me because I'm not like a boring person, right?
You
Like the
are not.
skydiving is a
You
it's
are
a big
not.
hook. It's a big hook for high schoolers. I'm just gonna say that. Like they want to ask me so many questions
Hmm.
about that. And even podcasting. Kids are really interested in podcasting and creating. And like
Hmm.
this consume versus creating that Mark talked about. But it's like to turn it around and get kids off of this,
Yep.
right? Off of their phones or
Hmm.
off of like whatever school device they have and get them to think about like what are you creating?
Hmm.
What are you doing with because I sub in traditional K through 12 spaces. So for me to add value to Mark's whole point is that CTE needs to be in traditional K through 12 spaces. So I like take that really to heart because that's how you can change minds. And I don't know that he really like got to this point, but it's definitely like explicitly, but like student voices are so powerful right now. When my LinkedIn, I don't know why the algorithm feeds me, but I love it. It's probably because I like and comment on these. But there's so many like interns and high school, they're definitely high school
Yeah.
students or like young,
Yep.
like just out of high school students, and they're sharing like one they're sharing their U Science results and how it helped them in an internship or navigate something in their world. I just think this is so awesome.
Yeah.
But it's just these young people that are having their own light bulb moments. They're having their own like wow, like I can create, I can connect, I can build something here.
Hmm.
And even if they're whatever space they're in, but like that is making a big difference. And I, as someone older now, see that, and it is so exciting to see young people putting their voice out and sharing like what they're doing. Like, but if they're just like sitting in a class turning an assignment, like they're just being consumers, they're not like creating. And that shift is really, really important right now in education because it's so easy to consume. Consuming has never been easier,
Hmm.
ever in
Yeah.
the history of the world. You
Yeah.
could consume all day, every day, and
Hmm.
never create. And that would be missing the mark. And I think that's like maybe like education, like consumed too much and like wasn't creating enough.
Yep.
And there is a huge opportunity for that shift to go back in the other direction right now.
We just want to give a shout out to our our sponsor, UScience Bright Path.
What we've learned about U Science Bright Path, is that this tool is the best tool in order to help a kid or a young person or you, right? It really doesn't matter like your age, but you want to know what you're apt at and combine that with what you're interested in to pick a next step. I haven't seen a better option on the market, and that's why we love them. That's why they're one of our awesome sponsors.
My kids use it. So if you're going to ask me about an ed tech company and do you believe in it? I mean, my I've used it with my two children, right? I have conversations with my own kids and talking about, okay, this is what you're good at. This is what you're interested in. Let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at all the options here and let's vet through them. And by the way, those options constantly update. I mean, how can you get more real time than that?
Right. I'm just waiting for them to add skydiving instructor into the mix. Like, I don't know how you test for aptitudes on that. If they need help, I can help them.
You start with the individual in education. That's what we've been talking about in CTE all the time. Like who are they? Who is the individual in front of you? And even in the internship programs that I've worked with, it really starts with the student. It doesn't say, you're good at math, you should go this way. That's the old traditional kind of way that we thought worked, but we also know that there's data out there that that doesn't really work, right? So once a student knows who they are and kind of how they're wired to succeed, honestly, then you start to build from that. And that's the foundation. And what I like about UScience Bright Path is really it doesn't stop there. It can create a plan, individualized plan. And for us in CTE, that really helps me as an educator and even a father understand how can I really take a look at different industries and different connections that I have or that are in our community or anywhere for that matter. I mean, we have, these social networks that are business oriented. How can we help a student or again, my own kids understand and connect directly with these people? And I mean, it's all here. It's right in the platform.
If you're like interested in this, you want to learn more, we've got the link in the show notes. It's going to pop up on the screen. Check it out, learn more. They have demos. You can learn more about it, and we just love it.
I would say this is a bold statement, but I would say that traditional education systems have led to the social media addiction. I mean, I would say it, and here's why, right? Because we're trained in education in a traditional old school sense is to sit, be quiet, and watch and listen and take it in, right? Well, guess what you do on your phone? Same thing, right? So you're kind of trained to do that, which that's you got me thinking about that. I do want to go back to subbing because I had an opportunity actually to do this. Well, at it's springtime, so I'm actually on spring break right now. But one of the things that I got to do about a week ago was actually to sub. So we've had a lot of different things happening. People have their lives and such. So we had a lot of educators out, especially in CTE. Plus, they're going to out in the community. So when somebody goes out, you have to like figure out what to do in the classroom. That's a great point that you made though, Allie, is the first question that I do. So for instance, I went into a marketing class and again, I don't teach marketing this year, but who knows, next year I may be, who knows, right? That's what we do as CTE educators. But I went into a marketing class as a sub. And the first question I asked everybody was, why did you take this class? Right. And I love that question. And I even gave them the out of, look, if you heard it was easy, it's an easy A, fine. If your counselor told you to take it, fine. If you didn't have another class to take and you just needed a CTE credit, fine. Doesn't matter to me. I'm just, and the information that you get from each student is unbelievable. And to the point where there was minimal phone usage as we were having these conversations because it's about the student, right? It really, I'm not the owner of knowledge. I mean, I did talk to them a little bit about my brand, and I actually talked a little bit about disrupt education and who I am in CTE and different things like that. And I was like, we were talking, the lesson was about branding, right? So there was a 10-minute lesson out of a 50-minute time frame, right? And it was on a Friday. So, okay, late in the day. So, but every one of these students was engaged because I wanted information from them. Like, tell me more, tell me more,
Right.
tell me why. And there was an interesting student in there that was drawing, right? And this is what I love. And by the way, this is kind of tweaking into aptitudes and what like U Science Bright Path does and adding them to interest. But this student was drawing and he was drawing like kind of, it looked like Marvel comics, like just a hand, like a robotic hand or a mask or some really cool stuff, right? Um, and I was like, "Do you like to draw? Do you want to go into design?" He's very quiet, right? Kind of off on his own. And he was like, "Well, I mean, I just draw when I'm just listening or don't have anything to do." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." And a couple more, deeper questions about, what do you see yourself doing? What would be an amazing job, or what do you want to study? Anything. I don't care. Like, what are you looking at doing? Most of these kids are juniors and seniors. And he went right into, he just lit up. And right away he was like, I want to go into engineering and I just like engineering. I'm like, tell me more. Right? Like what kind of engineering? You like civil? Do you like what kind? There's all different kinds. And if you don't know, that's fine. I'm just asking. He wants to help engineer prosthetics. Like I just stopped in my tracks and I was like, you know what? That is so interesting and specific. I love that because you have thought about this. And I started asking him like why, he's like, I just think it's cool. Like somebody loses something and you're able to help them gain something back. This is a student in a marketing class And we're talking about branding, and I'm like, how would you brand yourself to start going to that direction? And now he's in, right? And again, I have never stepped foot in this classroom before. And that's the power of these questions. And I think that's the power of what Mark was talking about is, it's how we're teaching it. How is everything becoming individualized? And if we're still in this group, hey, we need to get this whole group to the next step at the same time, that's going to eliminate like the competition is like we're in trouble as public education if we're going to continue down that road. And he kind of alluded to that at the end of the podcast. But like to your point, Allie, like everybody's interested in just learning more, that clarity, that confidence. Once somebody knows what they're good at and then what they're interested in, that just blows it all crazy. And you can adapt it to anything, calculus, US history, whatever. And I think that's where the excitement grows. It's just the mindset shift of how we can get more and more educators to start thinking that way and dialing it in to where it's not about the subject. The subject comes after you find out what an aptitude and an interest is of a student, and then you can attach it to their world. And I can't wait to see the first education teaching school that comes up with this model because everybody's going to want to go there.
Right, the numbers are already like the wait lists are there for CTE, for
Yeah, what was
pathways
his
for
numbers?
he said he had like 340 slots and over 700
Yeah.
kids that wanted in.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no. Like
Hmm.
it's heartbreaking.
Hmm.
And for the 50% of kids that don't get in for whatever reason, and the capacity issue gets to be addressed.
Yeah.
And for local businesses and economic development, you have like the giant Super Bowl type opportunity in front of you,
Hmm.
right? To like really help a community drive growth and I mean, all of that workforce development and economic development, that is the work.
Hmm.
And so it's just like how do we do that locally? Because it's much easier to start there. Um, and and then obviously it does go faster with funding and policy, but there are ways that you can just get started in this work and build the capacity as you go. I mean, we've had so many people on the podcast. They're like Sandra Adams, her first episode, she's like, I started with like 8 students in one class, like one section, and now she's an administrator overseeing a much, much, much bigger program, like 10 years later.
Hmm.
It's completely possible to do this. And I know Mark kind of went in a different direction when I brought this up, but I do think about the impact of so many schools getting rid of shop classes and these CTE spaces for the high stakes testing scorecard marks that got pushed in the early 2000s, and how they're gonna those schools now are probably kicking themselves because they're gonna have to rebuild those spaces, because that's where the demand and like parents and students, like
Hmm.
the power of your voice really does make a difference in like how those things can get shifted, right? Like he said, I don't remember if this was on or off air, but like people vote with their feet. Where do they
Yep.
show up? Where
Yep.
is the enrollment? And that is the biggest power move you can make as an individual is where
Hmm.
you put your time and energy, and like where you send your kids to school and for what reason and all of that, because that's how the shifts are made. If the demand keeps increasing, people won't be able to ignore it. Like it's already shifting. Like I think about the episode last year we had with Mark and then this year, and the shifts in that time period alone, and how main stage CTE is. And I will say the other thing that's crossing my mind right now is right. Like, so Gary Vee talks about like the next millionaires are electricians, they're plumbers, they're all the tradespeople.
Hmm.
And I was like, wow, well, not only is like, we need people to build our roads and maintain our plumbing systems, but I hadn't thought about the diminishing returns of tradespeople coming in to teach the next millionaires.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because like now, right? So it's like a layered problem, people, that I hope you're hearing.
Right.
Okay, so we already don't have enough tradespeople. Now these tradespeople are the next millionaires.
Hmm.
How are you going to convince those people in the next 10 or 20 years to come in and teach the next, like the R, it's like it's diminishing returns. I was like, oh no.
Yep.
I
Yeah.
was like, something has to change here, because how are you going to get those people into the schools if stuff doesn't change for education? So it's like
Hmm.
it's a multiple level disruption that I'm seeing. And yeah, maybe that's what we need to have someone on and talk about, like that the much bigger avalanche issue that could happen, like if we
Yep.
don't get this right.
Yeah, definitely. That's happening right here. One of the things as we're kind of going through our whole staffing adjustments and different things in our district, um, there are what they call TEE teachers, or technology and engineering educators or something. I think I got that acronym right, but you get the point. There are 6 or 7 schools right now looking for one, and they can't find them. And so I think we need to get creative with that. I think that we need to get creative with, okay, well, let's like Brandon Bastide was talking about, like how do we give students internships at a scale to where they can actually learn on site with these people, so they don't have to give up their livelihood to and large pay to come to an educational room. I think we just need to think differently about how these quote unquote classrooms look. This is why I like the CTE model, is because it allows for flexibility. And yeah, maybe we don't have all these the shop classes in, but we were able in our community to put our students out into quote unquote shops and different things like that. Because yeah, I do remember. I mean, it hit a nerve when you were talking about last week and just alluded to it, where the shops and the kitchens and stuff were taken out of classrooms, especially in the middle school. That actually happened in my neighborhood here in Illinois, and I was shocked. And by the way, that happened about 7 to 10 years ago. It wasn't even that long ago. And I was shocked. I mean, I get the STEM thing. I get the STEAM movement. We're going to build like robots and different things like that. I get that. That's that. And by the way, there is a need for that, especially with AI and launching into manufacturing and understanding how to bring up an automated line. Right. But that's not what it was about. It was just about like fundamentals and things like that. But then they eliminated an entire wood shop. They eliminated some of the kitchens. And I'm like, well, what are we doing? So I think that's a challenge. But I think, that opens up the conversation to how can we do this differently for a yes and. I mean, Mark said it last week. You got a guy from a very large tech company who his bonus was more than what the education system was going to pay him to come teach. I mean, it's supply and demand, folks. So how do we? I think we can come up with creative ways, and I'm going to challenge our listeners. Hey, if you think of something, drop it in the comments right now, because I think that's very, very, very interesting. And again, I also really think with economic development and the incoming of like AI and those types of things. We didn't get on AI, and there's a lot of conversation. I mean, Mark alluded to like where schools are eliminating phones and all this stuff. We're just, again, we're looking at the symptom. We're not looking at the actual disease here of what's going on. And it comes down to, yes, we can still do traditional foundational education, and we need to do that. And we need to put this into practice where it actually relates to that student's aptitude and their interest as much as possible, or get close. And, that goes into one of the last questions, what do we get right or wrong last week with CTE? How does it look and what happens if it looks right or wrong? I always give a shout out to Christy Valesky on this because she's very intent on the way that we do things correctly and not just put CTE in for a public relations piece, or we just, like Mark said, build put a pod outside and say that's a classroom and check the box. It has to be very intentional, and it also has to be really, really like interested in each student. It's got to be personal, and it can be. And it can be. I'm telling you, it can be, but that changes the entire 1949 system, or whatever it was, where everybody is at a step and you got to move everybody to the next step. And we need to be okay with that. And I think that's where the challenge comes in, to where we really start looking at the client, the student, the learner, and I mean myself as well, as a person. What are you interested in, and what are your aptitudes, and then we can build from there. But that has to be in place. We can't just say, okay, we're gonna test your aptitudes, and we're gonna test your interest on these surveys, and however long they are, good, bad, or whatever. Which I will say, U Science is the best one I've seen. But we also have to have functionality behind it. You have to have. It can't be just, okay, well, here's what you're good at and here's what you're interested in, and the platform is going to tell you. No, you still need coaching behind it. So I think, Christy said that, Mark was saying that, we've talked about it, is you have to be very intent in changing in every student and understanding it. Like, look at it this way, and we've had other people talk about this on the podcast. What if you could know every single student's couple times in their K through 12, we'll say seventh grade and 10th grade in a traditional system, what they are interested in, which is easy, but those are going to change. But what they're good at, they're apt at. And then you build every single piece of curriculum around that, or adapted to it. You are going to get so much more movement. And talk about, look, if you want to go high stakes testing, I don't think you need to study for those, because when I go all the way back to episode 100, Trace Pickering said in Iowa Big, when they built that school off of interest and aptitudes, and the students, that he has the data that the high stakes testing increased a large percentage. So I think that's the opportunity that we have here, but it's got to be intentional. And that's why it takes bold leaders like Mark to lead this cause.
It absolutely does. And when I think about the CTE light idea, I was thinking about how that would relate to skydiving. And it would be I was thinking about this, I'm like, it's kind of like the equivalent of, like, okay, somebody comes in to skydive, we give them the training, and then we put like a virtual reality like headset over their eyes, and they like skydive virtually. And that it's definitely not what they would have come and paid for. And it would be a complete disservice to them. They would definitely be upset about it. I would definitely want a refund. And right, so like, what happens if we get this wrong? That's what I think about. And also, like, in terms of individualizing the experience, the longer I am a skydiving instructor, the more I can personalize that experience to each and every student. Because there are some students that, like, just getting out of the plane is the benchmark. And then there are others who have already gone and done indoor skydiving at like an iFly, and they have like already opened the skydiving information manual, and they like want to be a licensed skydiver, and maybe they have piloting experience, or we had somebody who was like a professional sailor. So like they really understand the wind, probably better than I do, like they compete. So like their ability to be a canopy pilot after the parachutes open is wildly different than somebody on their 90th birthday checking this off as a bucket list item. Like, it's just completely different. And an 18-year-old A high school student is just going to be different than somebody celebrating their 40th birthday and their kids are growing up and right, like every single student is different. And then it's very easy for me coming from education and then teaching people in the sky to know pretty quickly what someone's apt at or is not apt at
Hmm.
when skydiving. And how we have those conversations with those people is very individualized. That people do this in business and in the quote unquote real world all the time. And education has pockets of it, but it could be so much more streamlined with software and technology and AI.
Hmm.
And then like just shift the model to what you're talking about with we can build curriculum around any student. Like I can individualize the skydiving training. Like you can individualize the business training. I as I tutor, the way I tutor is completely different than when I like first started tutoring when I was still a teacher. Then now like everything I do with chemistry tutoring is to try and relate it to that student, make it make sense and personalize and show them what they're good at already. Because kids, they know what they're bad at. School's very good at telling you what you're bad at. Like it's extremely good at it. That's where I think schools miss the mark, is that school's gotten so good at telling you what you lack and
Hmm.
like what you're missing because it's just like the model of grading is traditionally like what did you miss, not what did you know. It's all focused on deduction
Yeah.
and not building
Yeah.
for the grading system. And that's that's where I think the mindset is totally off base if it's still there. And how like it's an easy shift is just focus on what your students are good at and like have conversations with them, because then you're going to motivate them. And that's
Hmm.
where the whole point of like conversations convert. That's where you can change minds and change lives. It's not like talking at someone, it's talking with someone.
Yeah.
That dialogue is so important. And you can have data behind it and should have data behind it. That's where you're going to light students up and also just disrupt education in really, really positive ways.
Yeah. I like that look, and it kind of reminds me of the quote that Mark said is making a mistake is the work. Like that's a powerful line. And that's a mindset right there. And I think as educators, practitioners, that's absolutely if we get out ahead and really want to change the way that we do things for the better, we've got to model that. We've got to model that because as an educator standing in front of the room where I have a student who will holler at me about maybe something that I put out there in AI, and they're like, yo, you wrote that with AI. It doesn't sound like you. There's two ways I can go with that as a quote unquote authoritative person in the room. I could say, that's not for you and blah, 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 blah. And then you go into ego. Or you do what Mark said is making that mistake. You're like, I did do that. Here's why. But how do you see that? And it opens up everything, everything. And if we cannot like avoid the tough topics, and when I say tough topics, I don't mean I'm right, you're not right. I mean like let me understand your view. It goes into empathy, it goes into efficacy. It's all these things. I mean, I go back to Sandra Adams, what she was talking about, the fluidity, fluency. Sorry, fluidity. Wow, is that a word? I don't know. I have
It
to
is.
ask Mark on that one. But yeah, like that's the point. Like really understanding that making mistakes is part of this process. A sailor, I'll go back to the sailor. I love that, the wind idea. A sailor never learned how to sail in calm seas. Like it's simple, right? But you also made me think about like how I love aviation. I remember when I was piloting the chute, I was like, oh, this is pretty easy. It was interesting
Mm-hmm.
because I understood the concepts and,
Yep.
kind of flap work and, there's no rudder or anything, but you kind of figure it out. So, but you're right. And then you go to the next step and you put these things into play and we really start to take a look at, what qualities can we pull from this, right? And I think that's one of the most important things as when we talk about pathways and pathway endorsements, I think a lot of people are misconceiving that we are, again, I go back to the pigeonholing. I'm not going to pigeonhole a kid. But again, like if you listen to a lot of things we talk about, a lot of things that like Christy Valesky, Jason Van Nuss talks about, I'm intertwining everybody we know. Mark Very, no, sorry, that's TJ Very and Mark Covelle. I love you guys, by the way. They know us. So, but anyway, like what everybody's saying here is no, as you teach CTE, you teach the transferable, durable skills and you focus on those because when, it's not an if, it's when you change and kind of shift into another area, you can use those skills to pivot, period. Right. And if we teach CTE that way, not like, oh, you go down the manufacturing pathway, you have to be a manufacturer or an engineer. No, like you take those skills and that learning and you bring it over here. I'm living proof of this, Allie. Like I'm a broadcast journalism major, right? I love doing this. But what am I using this for? I'm learning. I didn't know podcasting. There was obviously not computers. Yes, I'm old, like we have now. And actually I spent well over $20,000 to $30,000 on what my phone can do, right? But you learn it and you adapt. That's the skill sets that we are teaching students in CTE if it's done right. So I love that with Mark. What are your final thoughts on last week's and even this awesome conversation we're having today?
The future of education is not CTE light. It's not education light, and it's not donkeys in bathtubs. It's just where, that picture is just, it's really, when you really sit and think about like, why is that donkey in the bathtub? And if it's at any point in time, that's why I think like when you have that moment education of like, is that equivalent to a donkey in a bathtub? Because if it is, like maybe we should remove that thing, whatever it is. I mean,
Yep.
like it's a good visual to keep in mind, like, be like a fun sticker to have, and then it'd be a good reminder to be like, is this a donkey in a bathtub moment? And do we need to maybe reconsider what we're doing? Because that doesn't make any sense. And if somebody has sense of donkeys in bathtubs, like by all means, hit me up on social media or email us, contact us at disrupteducationpodcast.com to let us know what we're missing with that and other crazy laws that exist, so that we can better disrupt education.
You brought it all the way around. I knew we could do it. The donkey in the bathtub. I love that. We're going to be using that, We're going to be using that. That's going to be new. I like it. So anyway, so thank you guys so much. Again, there's a bunch of challenges that we threw out in this podcast. We really do want to hear from you. If you have any comments or anything or reach out to us, you can connect with us, like Allie said, at disrupteducationpodcast.com. Follow us, share it out. Look, all we're trying to do here is to get that donkey out of the bathtub. So want to thank you all for listening. For Alli Dahl, I'm Peter Hostrawser. Appreciate you guys. We'll catch you next time on the Disrupt Education Podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Disrupt Education Podcast. If this episode sparked an idea, challenged your thinking, or helped you see education differently, well, that's exactly why we're here. We're highlighting real stories and bold ideas shaping the future of learning. A quick thank you to our sponsor, UScience BrightPath, the next generation platform helping students make personalized decisions as they move from education to career. If you're serious about connecting students to real opportunity, head to uscience.com/disrupteducation-podcast. Request a demo and let them know you heard about UScience right here on the Disrupt Education Podcast. For more episodes and clips and ways to connect, you can always visit disrupteducationpodcast.com. I'm Peter Hostrawser. Keep disrupting. We'll see you next time on the podcast.